Toaplan was a video game developer who existed from 1984 to 1994, most well known for their arcade games, particularly their shoot-'em-ups. While you may not know their name, you probably recognize something they've had their hands in, and you should know of their impact. Probably the most well-known thing from Toaplan isn't even one of their games, but rather a meme that spawned from a port of one of their games. They created the game Zero Wing, a game completely overshadowed by a poorly translated line from the intro of the European release of its Sega Mega Drive port. That being, all your base are belong to us. One of the earliest foundational internet memes and one of the longest enduring ones. But even then, they've made some other popular and widely influential games. The NES version of their game Tiger Heli sold 1 million copies in North America alone, making it one of the best-selling games in the shoot-'em-up genre. And that version is one of the games that helped put publisher Acclaim on the map. That being said, it's probably the least well remembered of all of the NES games that have sold over 1 million copies, but it was widely influential to the shoot-'em-up genre, and established many of the conventions used by vertical shoot-'em-ups going forward that didn't come from Devious with an X, Star Force, or Twinbee beforehand, such as defensive bombs and automatic rotating power-ups. In fact, Tiger Heli is the focus of the first mystery in this video. See, Tiger Heli has a very distinct visual style that really makes it stand out. Some people say it looks ugly, but I personally think the game looks alright. In an interview conducted in 2012, Toaplan designer Masahiro Yuge was asked about the graphics in Tiger Heli, to which he replied, "Actually, around that time we were doing research for a flight simulator program we might develop. The designer used a sample image from that simulator in Tiger Heli. As for the simulator itself, we continued working on it up until the very end of Toaplan, but we never announced it publicly." So according to Yuge, for a decade spanning from Tiger Heli's development up until Toaplan's closure in 1994, they had secretly been working on a flight simulator, and yet this is the only mention of it. It would be interesting to know more about it and if remnants of it ended up in any of their other projects. But for now, this is all we know. The next mystery is one that's been bugging me because I swore I knew the answer, but now I just can't find it, and it concerns Toaplan's logo. It looks like a pancake that's been cut to form a C, but Toaplan doesn't have a C in their name, so what does it mean? I have searched everywhere and I can't find any explanation of what the logo is supposed to represent. I've actually seen a couple of cases online of people confusing Toaplan and another company known for making shooting games around the same time, Compile. And I think their logo looking like the first letter of Compile's name doesn't help. It's pretty easy to see why though, as they were making games around the same time, and what Toaplan was for arcade shoot-'em-ups, Compile was for home shoot-'em-ups. Though unfortunately I feel their reach of influence was cut much shorter than Toaplan's. Compile is also better known for their puzzle game franchise Puyo Puyo. Part of this confusion may be because Toaplan actually published one of Compile's most popular shooters, Musha Alesta, for the Sega Mega Drive in Japan. But other than helping a few ex-Compile staff members start up their own arcade-centric company, Rising, Toaplan didn't have any other involvement with Compile to my knowledge. I've also seen people confuse Toaplan and Cave, who also has a C for a logo. Though that at least makes sense, as Cave was founded by ex-Toaplan employees after their bankruptcy. I doubt there's a connection in terms of the logos though. Cave is an acronym meaning Computer Art Visual Entertainment. But yeah, back to the point, I have no clue what Toaplan's logo is supposed to represent, and I couldn't find an explanation for it. That being said, just in case you were wondering, their name just means East Asia Plan. Moving on, let's talk about a game not made by Toaplan, but rather a little game made by Taito called Fighting Hawk, released in March of 1989. 1989 was a rough year for arcade manufacturers due to a memory chip shortage that began the previous year, so companies like Taito started taking initiatives to produce cheaper and less ambitious games, and Fighting Hawk is clearly part of that, being a decent but unremarkable vertically scrolling shooter. Well, I would say unremarkable if it weren't for its banger soundtrack, but outside of that, I also find it odd that it plays a lot like Toaplan's early games. This on its own doesn't seem odd, they were fairly popular games at this point in time, so of course lots of games tried to copy their formula, but Taito doing it is baffling to me, as Taito had distributed the arcade versions of every single Toaplan shooting game in Japan up to that point. So instead of trying to copy the formula themselves, they could have just gotten Toaplan to make them another game. Now they would do stuff like this again with games like Geki Rindan, which take a lot of very obvious influence from Toaplan's games, but when that game had come out, Toaplan was already bankrupt. What makes Fighting Hawk baffling is that just a few months after its release, in June of 1989, Taito would release Twin Hawk, or Daisenpu as it was known as in Japan, which was another vertically scrolling shooter with a military theme, but this time actually created by Toaplan themselves, specifically at the request of Taito. Done as a commission. It was actually the only shooter made by Toaplan not to be made on their own proprietary hardware, but rather Taito's X system board. So this really makes me wonder why Fighting Hawk exists and if there's somehow a connection between Fighting Hawk and Twin Hawk, but the developers have never commented on it. My best guess is that maybe Twin Hawk or some other Taito project kept falling behind schedule, so Taito quickly whipped up Fighting Hawk to release to fill a gap. Let me know what you think. Alright, this next mystery really bugs me, as I guess I don't even know what I'm looking for, and I don't know if what I am looking for is even on the internet, which makes it above my pay grade, but I really want to solve it, and it has to do with the arcade release of Zero Wing and who distributed it. The US version was distributed by Williams Electronics, and that's not up for debate as Williams Zero Wing cabinets aren't hard to find. But when it comes to who distributed the game in Japan, I see all sorts of conflicting reports. Some say Taito, while others say Namco. If it's true that Namco distributed Zero Wing in Japan, then that would make it the first shooter by Toaplan not to be distributed by Taito there. The source for this claim seems to come from the 2005 book Arcade TV Game List Domestic Overseas by Masumi Akagi, which painstakingly chronologically lists almost every arcade video game to see a wide release from 1971 to 2005 by developer and distributor, and for a lot of games, it serves as the only source for their release date and sometimes even existence. However, I cannot find any high-quality images of a Japanese Zero Wing cabinet, and promotional materials such as flyers only credit Toaplan. It probably wouldn't even be that hard to find an image of a Japanese Zero Wing cabinet, but I can't find one just by looking it up, and I doubt that would even offer a solution to the mystery. The reason I have doubts about the game being distributed by Namco is that it seems to be the only time Toaplan ever worked with Namco. Plus, there's very little documented proof that Namco distributed the game outside of this source and websites using it as a source for the claim. And the developers have never commented on it, which is odd, as if it was their first shooter not to be distributed by Taito in Japan, that would probably be a big deal. Also, like 2 of you are probably wondering why I was using footage of the Mega Drive version of Zero Wing while talking about the arcade game, and the reason why is because I didn't want to have to put up an epilepsy warning. Like, you may think it's unnecessary when I've already been going on about arcade shoot-em-ups, but trust me, it's bad in the arcade version of Zero Wing. Every time an enemy dies in the arcade version, it flashes the whole screen. And I have a feeling that would be pretty rough for some people, so I just decided to not use that footage. And yeah, that's really all I had for the mysteries part of the video. Just one segment for one subject, but still a bunch of different mysteries. But I don't just want to end things here. Given how relatively obscure Toaplan is, even in modern retro gaming circles, I want to talk more about what I like about them and give my recommendations and whatnot, because I feel they deserve more love, and I don't think you guys would watch another video where I talk about this stuff on its own, but who knows, let me know if you would. But if you only came for the mysteries, thanks for watching. Honestly though, the only games of theirs I can recommend to the average casual player are probably Zero Wing, Vimana, and Batsugun. Their games tend to be pretty difficult, and on top of that they have pretty punishing checkpoint systems, though fair ones unlike some other games. I used to not like shoot-em-ups with checkpoint systems, but I've grown to like them. I suffer from ADHD, so I try to stay away from stuff that feeds it, so I really like games that demand so much of my attention, but I also understand that other people don't. But personally, games like this are kind of therapeutic to me. But some of their games, or at least other versions of them, have respawns instead of checkpoints, so maybe play those versions instead if you prefer. Also, I don't know where else to say this, but if you love great video game music but weren't familiar with Toaplan, you've been missing out on a treasure trove. These games are worth playing for their music alone. However, I think Batsugun, their last shoot 'em up, is their best game, and more people should give it a chance. I've read a few interviews where developers of this game lament that it doesn't feel very Toaplan-y, and I couldn't disagree more, as it really feels like the ultimate culmination of everything they learned over the course of making these games. Honestly, I should probably give it its own video, but I just couldn't hold back talking about it and its reputation, and in turn the reputation of the genre here for a bit. First off, lambuxuaciously, this game is fantastic. I generally prefer more gritty shoot-em-ups, but this game has that whole Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy X, Super Mario Sunshine, Sonic Adventure kind of summer beach vibe everyone loves now going on. Except it did it years earlier in 1993. I love the music and the contrast from the upbeat stage music and darker boss music, and I can't help but feel it has a little tinge of sadness to it, with this being Toaplan's last shooter and all. But it also has a colorful cast of characters, some of which actually have connections to other Toaplan games. It came from that time after Street Fighter II when shoot-em-ups kinda had to include appealing characters to take back the attention of arcade goers. My favorite character is Iceman, who's as cold as ice. Yeah, just like the Mega Drive Zero Wing, the European version of this game has a pretty hilariously awkward English translation. But even outside of that, the gameplay is incredible. The pacing is so good. It has the best level design of any shoot-em-up. Things start relatively chill and then build up. But the sad thing about this game is that I feel like a bunch of people have heard of it, but because of its reputation, they don't want to play it. It's often considered the father of bullet hell, and that term alone seems to scare people away from anything. And I feel not only does the term not really do some of these games justice, just boiling them down to one attribute, but also, even though most of the subgenre's conventions come from Batsugun, as a lot of the people who worked on this game went on to form other companies like Cave that specialized in bullet hells, it wasn't even the first game that I think you could call bullet hell. Also, I'd say there's kind of a difference between bullet hells and manic shooters. Those terms are often used interchangeably, but I think bullet hells are more tightly designed and really all about that, while manic shooters still follow old school conventions, but both share elements, and I wouldn't say either is bad. But bullet hell or Danmaku can be used as an umbrella term for these kinds of games. I'd say Batsugun is more of a manic shooter, and it's way easier than you'd think. I think a lot of people automatically assume because of the name that bullet hell games are all hard, but they aren't as hard as people think. It's a really stigmatized subgenre, and I won't lie and say some of those stigmas are always untrue, but none of them really apply to Batsugun. It's fun even if you suck. You don't need to worry about score or clearing the game in one credit to have fun with it, and despite a lot of people saying that's the sole appeal of these games, they're wrong. And if you're only going in looking to boss every game around first try, you're only going to be disappointed. And I think you should really look for other things to enjoy about these games. There's plenty of fun to be had just from getting a short rush of blowing stuff up, dodging bullets, soaking in the atmosphere, just letting the game take you on a ride, playing the game over and over again, finding new things, or playing with a friend. This game wasn't intended to be niche, it just ended up that way. To me, shoot 'em ups kind of have the same appeal as platformers, which makes sense as most of the early design conventions of platformers started in shooters. You know, most 2D platformers and most shoot 'em ups are straightforward short level-to-level adventures where you overcome basic, increasingly difficult challenges to progress. I think a lot of people think shoot 'em ups are more unfair because they automatically scroll, but they really aren't. I mean, while I won't argue that there aren't more hard shoot 'em ups, I think people just like to slap the label trial and error, the boogeyman of things people hate in video games, on anything. But there's layers to it. There's games that are fair and rely mainly on skill, games that are fair but rely more on memorization, which makes them easier to replay, games with trial and error that's made a bit more excusable by the fact that it has a sense of flow to it, and unfair games that just don't have any satisfying sense of flow. And most shoot 'em ups fall around the second category. But to my point, Batsugun is a game that I think everyone who likes 2D action games can enjoy, especially if you prefer quality over quantity, and I definitely recommend you check it out. The worst thing I can say about it is that most of the home releases of the game kinda suck, so I just recommend you play it however you can. Honestly, I should probably just keep it there. I could go on about other Toaplan games forever, so let me know if you would want to see me talk about them more in another video. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons for sticking with me during my absence there. I promise I will be back with more videos soon.